Hello guys, and welcome to another episode of my lecture. This is Olayeni Dear Kolola Daniels, popularly known as Dear Ko Spectre, and this is another episode of Dear Ko Talks Law from the Dear Ko Daniels School of Law. And today's episode will be talking about our 8th maxim, which is equality is equity. We have discussed about our first maxim. Equity will not suffer a wrong without a remedy. We have discussed the second maxim. Equity follows the law. We have discussed the third maxim. Where there is equal equity, the law shall prevail. We have discussed the fourth maxim. Where the equities are equal, the first in time shall prevail. We have discussed the fifth maxim. He who seeks equity must do equity. We have discussed the sixth maxim. He who comes to equity must come with clean hands. We have discussed the seventh maxim. Equity will aid the vigilant and not the indolent. Today we are on our 8th maxim, which is equality is equity. If this is your first time of coming to my channel, please make sure that you click the subscribe button. Make sure that you click the notification bell so that anytime I release a lecture which is going to be of interest to you like this one, you'll be one of the first set of people to watch that particular lecture. Do not forget to click the notification bell so that when I release a lecture, you will definitely get it. Now, let's go straight to my lecture for today, where we will be talking about equality is equity. Now, under this maxim, people who are entitled to property would have the certainty and fairness of equal division, for equity did delight in equality. Now, the application of this maxim is considered in four different scenarios. Number one, presumption of tenancy in common. Number two, severance of joint tenancy. Number three, equal division by the court. And number four, the doctrine of satisfaction. Now let's start with number one, and I want you guys to follow me because this lecture seems to be one of the most complicated, but I will simplify it as much as I can for your understanding, because your understanding is what is paramount to me. So I will make sure I simplify it as much as possible. So let's start with presumption of tenancy in common. I told you once that land law and equity, they go hand in hand. In my last lecture, when I talked about equity avails the vigilant and not the indolent, I always keep on using land law. I even have to quote Ekpendu and Erika when it comes to land customary tenure system and all that. Now we are going to land law again, but don't worry, I will make it as simple as possible. Now, under presumption of tenancy in common, equity leans against what? Joint tenancy. Now, equity dislikes the joint tenancy, for in it the right of the survivorship, known as the jus accrescendi, operates. Now, what does the jus accrescendi mean? The survivor of two, where there are more than two joint tenants, on the death of one of them, the property vests in the survivors and the process continues until there is only one survivor, who then holds the land as a sole tenant. What does that mean? Now, you see, in the olden days in England, you rarely see it now. In the olden days in England, there is something known as joint tenants. You see, what joint tenants mean is this. Now, I want to buy property, but I don't have the money. Now, I call two of my friends. Badebo ati Ishola. Oh yeah, why? Come. I want to buy property at Banana Island. I heard that place is really bubbling. So, and I only have 100 million. Will you people, contribute? Let us bring money together and buy a very large property. Then we can know how we are going to do it. And then Badebo brought 100 million, Ishola brought 100 million, I brought 100 million. That's how much? 300 million. Then we bought, a very good house that has different parts where we can live in and all that. Now, if any of us dies, instead of the person's estate, a person's estate is that person or those people that will take your property when you are dead. They are known as your estate or whatever. So instead of the person's estate, or the person's hair, or the person's whatever, to take parts of his 100 million share in the house that we bought together at Banana Island, according to the principle of jus accrescendi. What it means, or jus accrescendi, whatever you decide to call it, what it means is the moment he dies, his interest or whatever share he has falls on the both of us that remain. That is me and Gbadebo. Let's say Ishola was the person that died. Do you understand that? Now, instead of his 100 million, like I said, the 100 million part of the property, instead of it to go to whoever is supposed to benefit from his estates, it will automatically fall on us. We are the owners of his 100 million. Are you listening? Because it's a joint tenancy. Now, if I die, or if Gbadebo dies at the end of the day, what is going to happen? Instead of Gbadebo's 100 million to go to his estate, it falls on me. So according to the principle of jus accrescendi, or jus accrescendi, or the principle of joint tenancy, what it means is, where you have people who are joint tenants, at the death of one person, the interest of that person falls on the other joint tenant, and it continues in that manner till you have one sole surviving tenant who will then have all the interest of the other people and can then pass it to his own estate or generation. Do you understand that? It is unfair according to equity, because equity says what's going on here? Share the 100 million that Ishola gave, why is it falling on the other tenant? It's supposed to fall on the estate of Ishola. Why is it falling on the other tenant? But the law will say, well, that is the principle. Equity will say, no, that principle is unfair. So that is why, let me read the beginning of that line again. It says, equity leans against joint tenancy. Equity dislike joint tenancy, for in it the right of the survivorship, that is the jus accrescendi, operates. The survivor of the two, but where they are more than two joint tenants, on the death of one of them, the property vests in the survivors, and the process continues until there is only one survivor, who then holds the land as a sole tenant, and then it is not as if he's the owner of the property. Do you understand? So me, that was the one that called Gbadebo and Ishola to come and give me, now that they are dead, and I say, wow, fantabulous. Now I can do and undo on this property. And then the estate, let's say the wife of Ishola and Gbadebo, they are hungry, or they are there. I say, well, you see, this property is mine, and that is what the law says. Sorry about that. Very, very sorry about that. you understand what I'm saying? It is unfair according to equity. So now, the joint tenants are entitled to the property, and the estate of the deceased takes nothing. Can you see that? Now, in a tenancy in common, now let us go to tenancy in common. Now I'm distinguishing joint tenancy from tenancy in common, but let me read the notes to you. In a tenancy in common, on the other hand, the share of a deceased passes not to the survivor, that is the other joint tenant, but to those entitled under the deceased will and intestacy. For a tenant in common has a distinct share in the property, which is his to dispose of as he wishes. Can you see that? When you're talking about joint tenancy, if what we had, me, Gbadebo, and Ishola, when Ishola died, I cannot take Ishola's share of the property. The estate can come and say, so which part is Ishola's part? Can we sell it? Would you like to buy Ishola out and stuff like that? But if it's joint tenancy, as the estate people are coming, I carry cane and flog them out and say, no, this is joint tenancy, and therefore I have the right to the land, and all that. And then equity, like I said, leans against joint tenancy. Now, there are three instances where equity would treat joint tenants at law as tenants in common of the beneficial interest, so that Although at law the survivor is entitled to the whole property, in equity he will be regarded as trustee of the deceased share for the benefit of those entitled under the latter's will or intestacy. So what this is saying is, equity would intervene under joint tenancy in 3 instances. There are 3 instances where equity will intervene. Do not forget that this rule is equality is equity. Equity does not see joint tenancy as equality. That is against what equity stands for. So when somebody gives you 100 million and then you are now, when the person dies, taking the whole interest, who you be? Who is your daddy? Why will you take his interest? That is what equity is asking. Equity now divides 3 ways by which, although you can be a joint tenant at common law, but once the equitable jurisdiction of the court is invoked, you are going to be a trustee of that property. Trustee means that you are holding the property in trust for the person. What does that mean? Holding the property in trust for the person. It means that yes, you have the legal interest in the property, but the estate of the other person, that is Ishola's estate, has the equitable interest in the property. Do you understand what that means? So me now, I am, the surviving person. Dadebo is dead. Ishola is dead. Under the common law, I know to send their dad. The estates, I know send them. If they like, they come and say, Mr. Dearco, we have served you notice. We want to take our interest and all that and all that. I am here as a lawyer for Mr. Gbadebo. The other party saying, I am here as a lawyer for Mr. Ishola. And I'm looking at the both of them and saying, if una no comot for ya, she una no understand wetin they call joint tenancy. Do you understand that? But under equity, there are 3 instances where my joint tenancy will be converted into tenancy in common in equity. Where when their lawyers come and say that they want to take their share of the interest, that is the estate, I cannot tell them to leave the property because they have the equitable interest and I am a trustee of Gbadebo's and Ishola's rights or interests. Do you understand? So what are those 3 instances as in this case? Now these instances are A, where the property is purchased with unequal shares of money. Number 2, when there is loan on mortgage. And number 3, partnership. Now let us start with number 1. Now, where the property is purchased with unequal share of money. Where 2 persons, that is X and Y, purchase property. Let us say me, Gbadebo and Ishola, we purchased property, providing the purchase money in unequal shares. Okay, Ishola gave 50 million, Gbadebo gave 150 million. That is how much? That is 200 million. Then I gave 100 million. You can see that is what? Unequal shares. And have the property conveyed to them as joint tenants. So this is it. When we bought the property, we, according to the deed that conveyed that property to us, the deed did not say that we are tenants in common, which would mean that on the death of any of us, our estate can take the interest. The deed said that we are joint tenants, which means that at the death of any of us, the interest goes to the survivor, not to the estate. Good. So now the deed says that we are what? Joint tenants. On the death of Gbadebo and Ishola, Dearco becomes entitled to the property at law, but in equity he holds the property in trust for both Gbadebo's and Ishola's estates for the share of the property proportionate to the amount advanced by Gbadebo and Ishola, while Dearco would of course have his own share, which is according to the amount that he gave. Do you understand that? Where you give money in unequal shares, it would mean that automatically, even though the conveyance on the document, what was written there is joint tenant, it would mean that at the end of the day, equity would treat it as tenant in common because you advanced what? Unequal shares of money. Now note that where the money is advanced in equal shares, that is, Y will be entitled to the whole property both at common law and in equity. So where me, Gbadebo and Ishola, like the example that I gave earlier, 100 million, 100 million, 100 million, at the death of Gbadebo and at the death of Ishola, I will hold the property. Because we have what? Equal shares. Y is entitled to the whole property both at common law and in equity, for it is presumed that when two persons advance equal amount, they intend jus accrescendi to what? To operate. That is the presumption. Where three of us, we advance money of equal share, we intend jus accrescendi to operate. But where we advance money in unequal share, we don't intend jus accrescendi to operate, even where the documents clearly stipulate joint tenants. Now the authorities are what? Lake versus CRADDOCK and Lake versus Gibson. You can decide to look up the cases at your convenient time. We go to the next one. So I told you, under the presumption of tenancy in common, the second thing we have to look at is what? Loans on mortgage. So where two persons, let me keep saying me, Gbadebo and Ishola. So where two persons, X and Y, lends money to Z, that is where Dieko, Gbadebo and Ishola lends money to Zaidu. Now who then mortgages his property to them jointly? Zaidu mortgaged his property to us jointly. Are you listening? So Zaidu came to meet us and said, Dieko, Gbadebo, Ishola, I need 500 million right now. I have a property or different properties at different places. I'm going to give you guys those property. I need to do one oil business. It's going to, give me a lot of money. And we came together and said, okay. How do we give this guy this money? So we gave him 200 million ish, and then he gave us his property as joint tenant. Now, look at what they are saying here. It is immaterial whether the amount lent was equal or unequal. Since the transaction is a loan, a tenancy in common is implied, so that the surviving mortgagee will be a trustee for the estate of the deceased mortgagee of the part of the share which is proportionate to the sum lent to the individual. This is what we are saying. Because it is only a loan agreement, let us say that at the end of the day, Zaidu was not able to pay us, which means we then become owners of the property automatically. Right now, the law, even though he mortgaged the property to us as joint tenants, the law will not interpret it as joint tenancy, or at least we interpret it as joint tenancy only at common law. But in equity, whether or not we advance equal share or we advanced unequal share, don't forget that if you want to buy the property, you must advance equal share for it to be joint tenancy. If you advance unequal share, it will be tenancy in common. But under loans of mortgage, whether it is equal or unequal, the court of equity treats it as tenancy in common. Do you understand that? So that when Zaidu can no longer pay our money, we then become tenants in common of that estate. And if any of us dies without us selling the property and sharing the money, the survivor cannot be said to hold the property entirely. He is holding the part of the property that belongs to Ishola and Gbadebo in trust for the estates of Ishola and Gbadebo. When they now decide to come for their property, Dieko must give them their side of the property, whatever interest. And lastly, partnership. Two or more people may form partnership to engage in business with any property acquired by partners in their business is held by them as beneficial tenants in common, as jus accrescendi inter mercatores locum non habit. Jus accrescendi inter mercatores locus non habit. The right of survivorship has no place in business. So far we have advanced money, whether or not is equal or is unequal? Let us say equal because of that first rule. We bought a property together for us to start business. Let's say we want to do bakery, and we bought a whole building. I advanced 50, Gbadebo advanced 50, Ishola advanced 50. Because the subject matter of that building is for business, it will not be joint tenants. Because according to our Latin maxim, jus accrescendi inter mercatores locum non habit, the right of survivorship has no place in business. When our business is rounding up or winding up or closing down or anything, we are going to share it equally as tenants in common and not as what? Joint tenants. And we are done with our first example. That is the instance by which we can have what? Equality is equity. I told you that the first instance is what? Presumption of tenancy in common. Now we are going to our second instance, which is severance of joint tenancy. What does that mean? Now, a joint tenant may convert joint tenancy into tenancy in common by severance. Where there is a joint tenancy, both at common law and in equity. For example, where you have that is where two joint tenants purchased a property with what? Equal amount. Do you understand that? Where you buy a building and then I transferred 50, Gbadebo 50, Ishola 50, then we are joint tenants both in common law and in equity. So where you have a joint tenant both in common law and in equity, equity will readily treat the joint tenant as severed and thus convert it into tenancy in common, thereby excluding right of survivorship where there is any alienation or severance. Are you listening to me? Any alienation of his interest by a joint tenant will bring about a what? A severance. Even an agreement to alienate suffices, provided that it is made for value as held in the case of Brown and Randall. What does this mean? This is telling us that where we have a joint tenancy, are you listening? And then there is a severance. What does a severance mean? A severance can be in form of an alienation or can be an agreement to sever. Now, I want to meet Gbadebo. Gbadebo, kilo shele now. Kilo solve. Yes. Shori. I want to go into the aviation business. Mo fẹ́ bẹ̀rẹ̀ sí máa, ní DICKENS Airlines. Yes, mo like orúkọ yẹn, DICKENS Airlines. So with that, or let's say DK Airlines. Surely, fantabulous, right? Very good. Surely property wa yẹn tó wà ní Banana Island. You see that our property at Banana Island. I want to take my part of it, and I want to, invest it into my DICKENS Airlines business. Are you listening to me? So yes. Now, the moment I have severed it, the whole entirety has broken down. Are you listening? So for example, we are 10 in that joint tenancy. One person severed, everything is severed. Do you understand? One person said, I want to carry my money, I want to carry my interest, I want to carry my share, I want to carry my parts. The moment one person severs, everything is severed. Do you understand that? So when we come back to this, there are two ways where you can actually sever: by alienation or by agreement to alienate. So agreement to take your alienation is where you take your property, where you treat your property like it's your own and not treating it like it is a joint tenancy. You are treating it like it is your own. Do you understand? But where there is an agreement to alienate, it has to be made for what? For valuable consideration. Now we go to the case of Ikpaye versus Aribisola. I like this case because it explains what I'm saying. Alienation may be made by outright sale or gift or mortgage. So I can sell my part of it, or I can gift my part of it to somebody, or I can mortgage my part of it, or I can treat my part of it like it is mine and it is no longer what? Belonging to everybody. Do you understand? But in this case, it was a mortgage, as in the case of Ikpaye versus Aribisola. Now, the fact were that the plaintiff and his brother were joint tenants under a settlement of land. So which means that under settlement of land, for example, let's say a will, for example, the will gave two brothers land as joint tenants. Are you listening? Now, the deed of settlement were kept in the brothers' custody. So let's have Dieko and Gbadebo, for example. Our daddy gave us land and made us joint tenants, but the deed of settlement of that land was kept with Gbadebo. Are you listening? Now, after the death of the brother, after the death of Gbadebo, it was discovered that he had, without consent of Dieko, the plaintiff, deposited that deed with the defendant, that is a bank, as security for a loan. Gbadebo needed money. Instead of Gbadebo to go and hustle and find money, Gbadebo now took our property, our house that our father gave to us as joint tenants. Not tenant in common, no, joint tenant. They used the certificates or the settlement, the document. He dropped it as security for a loan in the bank, thus creating an equitable mortgage. You know that the difference between legal mortgage and equitable mortgage is that for equitable mortgage, you don't necessarily sign documents and all that. You just deposit whatever document it is. Deposit means that you just, hey, take, give me money, and that is equitable. But for legal, you must have signed documents, you must have, stamped it and all that. Those ones are legal mortgage. So he created an equitable mortgage of his brother's interest in the property. Do you understand that? So the question was, did this operate to sever the joint tenancy? Obviously, now he has already treated his parts of the share like it is his own. He isn't treating it like he's a joint tenant. Do you understand? He's treating it like it's his property, obviously. So now, if the answer were in the affirmative, the brother would become a tenant in common, and the mortgage to the defendant would have been a valid alienation of the brother's interest, thus entitling the defendant to retain possession of the deed. What that means is, if we are saying yes, this is no longer a joint tenancy but a tenancy in common because it has been severed, what we are saying is this, that yes, the bank can keep the deed. Why? Because it is not a joint tenancy anymore. It is now a tenancy in common. But on the other hand, if there are no severance, the right of survivorship would operate to vest the property in the plaintiff. Do not forget that it is a joint tenancy. Therefore, no other person but the plaintiff is supposed to have the right that the other person has. That is the brother. So, where in a joint tenancy someone dies, or in a joint tenancy something happens to a person, the next person in line to take the interest of that person is the joint tenant. So, if the brother is coming to court, that's Dieko in this case, is coming to court and telling the court, my lord, I want you to treat this as a joint tenancy, so that the interest that this bank think that they have, they actually do not have it, because Badebo cannot give them that interest. The person who can have that interest is me, because the rule is jus accrescendi, that is the right of the survivor. The survivor gets the land, the survivor gets the deed. But the court seemed to have a different perspective. The full court held, overturning the decision of the divisional court, that the equitable mortgage had turned into a legal mortgage, which did bring about a severance, and a legal joint tenancy being converted into tenancy in common in equity. He made no difference that the mortgage was without the knowledge or consent of the plaintiff. For one joint tenant may validly sever without concurrence of the other, and this is the principle in this case. Everything that we have been learning so far, according to the case of Ikpaye versus Aribisola, what we are saying is that in a joint tenant, you can sever it either by mortgage, either by gift, either by sale, or by alienation without the other party giving a concurrent consent. That's the principle. You don't need the other party to give consent. So, Dieko now in this case, whose father gave he and Badebo, settlement of land and said, this is supposed to be held joint tenant. Dieko is coming to court and he's telling the court, my lord, the other party here, the bank, They are arguing that he dropped the title deeds with them, thereby creating an equitable mortgage. But my lord, equitable mortgage or not, this is a joint tenancy. You cannot create an equitable mortgage where I did not give consent. But my lord said, no, this is no longer an equitable mortgage. The moment where Gbadebo decided to treat the property like his, then that is his share of the property, then he automatically converted it into tenancy in common when he decided to mortgage his part of the property. Therefore, the bank can have the title deeds. Do you understand that? And you cannot anymore treat this as what? A joint tenancy. But do not forget that DICKENS part has not been mortgaged. It is Gbadebo's part that was mortgaged. Do you understand? So nothing can happen to DICKENS part. It's only Gbadebo's part that they will take, but it is no longer joint tenancy. Because what DICKENS was coming to argue in court is that, my lord, it is joint tenancy. The bank is not even supposed to have the right to Gbadebo's interest. It is the rule of jus accrescendi. Therefore, I am the one that is supposed to have the right to Gbadebo's interest. The bank is not even supposed to have the deed in the first place. But my lord said no. The moment where he mortgaged it, he turned it into tenant in common and no longer joint tenant. You can see the case of GIWA versus BADEMIMUN 1932 11 NLR 160, or Jones and Maynard 1951 CH 572, or Rima and Rima in the year 1953 1 QB 63, and Ray Dickens in the year 1935 CH at 267. So now we are going to the third one, which is equal divisions by the court. Now, you know, don't forget that when we are talking about the Maxim equality is equity, there are 4 ways that it can be exemplified, and I already told you from the initial onset. The first way is presumption of what? Tenants in common. The second way is severance of joint tenants. The third way is this one that we are talking about, which is equal division by the court. Whenever there is no other fair and practicable basis which a property can be distributed amongst 2 or more rival claimants, the court will apply the maxim and divide the property equally amongst them. And we can see the case of Jones versus Maynard. A husband and his wife operated a joint account with a bank into which both of them paid their earnings. From this account, the expenses of the household was drawn. The husband invested the surplus from the account. There were substantial differences in the money paid into the account by the husband and the wife. There was no agreement, governing the account. The court held that on the dissolution of the marriage, the wife was entitled to 1/2 of the balance and 1/2 of the investment, in accordance with the maxim, equality is equity. Personally, I do not agree with this court's whatever equality is equity. Why? I will tell you. But I think that the only reason I have no choice but to agree is because there was no practicable way. Now let us imagine that, okay, we have husband, we have wife. Husband gives 500k every month inside an account. Wife gives 300k every month inside an account. And it continued like that for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. At some point, 5 years after, the husband said, we have a lot of money. We have 5 million, and it's going to be stupid to keep 5 million in the account doing nothing. Let us invest this money. Then the husband carried 5 million. Then he invested it, which now brought a proceed of 20 million. And that was the time where the marriage now became rocky, and then they wanted a divorce. And then the wife is saying that she wants proceeds of the account and proceeds of the investment. And then the husband is saying, no, you cannot have it. Why? Because when we were bringing money to this account, I was bringing 500,000, you were bringing 300,000. There is a 200,000 difference. You can't have the same thing that I'm having. The wife said no, she wants to have it and all that. Now the husband tried to look for other ways that are fair and practicable by which they can divide the property, but there was no other way. And then they got to court, and at some point my lord started having a headache, and then my lord said, oh yeah, at this point equality is equity. Everybody take equal share. Mona can't go in a papa house. So yeah. Take and leave this place. But at the end of the day, I felt that, you know, you shouldn't have applied equality is equity there. Why? Because why is it the proceeds that we're applying equality is equity for? Why is it that when they were putting the work in multiplying the money that is in the investment, who did it? The husband. Okay, why is it also that the husband had more money that was going into the account in the first place? So it wasn't equal then when the husband was bringing money to the account. It wasn't equal then when the husband was the only person investing the money. But now that the proceed is ready, we should be equal now. Like, do you understand? Now we are talking about equality. No, now it doesn't make any sense. You know, but then I felt that maybe because there is no fair and other practicable way by which they could have shared the property, and the court, you know, was saying, Mukina, no give me a headache, I beg, nothing else that I can do. I cannot go and bring mathematician to come and start calculating the percentage that the wife brought, the percentage that the husband brought, how we can, chairman, we have other things to use the time of the court for, and all that. So yes, that is that for equal division by the court. Every time where there is no other fair and practicable way, the court will apply equality is equity. Where there is to be presumption of tenancy in common, 3 ways by which you can have that presumption I already taught you earlier in this lecture. Where there is unequal share of money, where there is loan of mortgage, and where there is a partnership, and also where there is severance of joint tenancy, the presumption of equality is equity will also come into play. And then we have the fourth and the last, which is the doctrine of satisfaction. Equity considers that if a man has more than one child, it is unlikely that he would wish to provide for one child twice over to the detriment of the others. Hence, the sub-maxim equity leans against double portion is found in the present maxim. What we are basically saying is that when you are talking about doctrine of satisfaction, the court will not make a man who is deceased, you know, satisfy one person over and above all other children. The court will try to settle and, you know, provide for the other children using the proceeds of whatever the man left behind. That is why equity leans against what? Double portion. So thank you so much for watching this lecture to the end. Make sure that you subscribe, like, and share this lecture video with your friends. Our next lecture will be equity looks at intent rather than form, and I will see you in my next lecture. Please do not forget to follow me on LinkedIn at Dear Colola Daniels. See you in my next lecture.